On March 18, 2024, at my son's funeral, his business partner leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Don't worry, old man. I'll make better use of that $12 million than Tim ever did. I'm Harold Peterson. I'm 67 years old." And I didn't cry, I didn't gasp, I didn't turn around. I simply said, "Is that so?" Then I decided to do something about it. The rain came down hard that Tuesday morning in northeast Portland. Peaceful Rest Funeral Home. Sat on a corner lot, one of those old brick buildings that had seen generations say their goodbyes. I stood in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I could make myself walk inside. My son, my only child, lay in a mahogany casket at the front of the viewing room. Timothy James Peterson, born July 2, 1985. Died March 15, 2024. 39 years old. Cancer took my wife, Mary, 5 years ago. Pancreatic, stage 4. She was only 59. We'd been married 38 years. Now my son was gone too, and I was alone. Tim wore his favorite Navy suit, the one he'd bought for his first big business meeting with Peterson Construction. The funeral home had done a good job with him. He looked peaceful, like he was sleeping. But I knew better. "I'm here, son," I whispered. "Dad's here." I'd been in construction for 45 years before I semi-retired. Built Peterson Construction from nothing after I got back from Vietnam in '78. Started with just me and a pickup truck, doing small repairs and renovations. Tim joined me right after college, and we grew it into a $12 million company. Commercial projects, government contracts, the works. The medical examiner's report said acute cerebral hemorrhage, a stroke, massive bleeding in the brain. He'd collapsed at the office around 6:30 in the evening on March 15th. His business partner, Richard Thompson, found him and called 911. Tim was dead before the ambulance arrived. 39 years old, no history of high blood pressure, no heart disease, no warning signs. My Army training from Vietnam kicked in. I'd done some work with Criminal Investigation Division before I came home. Something wasn't right. I sat in the front row, my hands gripping my hat. Behind me I heard people filing in. Voices, whispers, the rustle of coats and umbrellas. Such a tragedy. So young. His poor father. I kept my eyes on my son. Then she walked in. Linda Peterson, Tim's wife of 6 years. She wore a black designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her dark hair was pulled back perfectly. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. She sat down beside me, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Her perfume filled the space between us. Something expensive. "Harold," she said softly, reaching for my hand. "I can't believe he's gone." I nodded. What was there to say? People continued to arrive. Tim's employees from Peterson Construction, his college friends, church members, neighbors. The room filled up fast. My son had been loved. But as I watched people come in, I noticed something. Linda checked her phone twice, 3 times. Quick glances when she thought no one was looking. She wasn't crying. Not really. The tissue touched her eyes, but there were no tears. And her left hand, the hand that should have been wearing her wedding ring, was bare, just a thin white line where the ring used to sit. I looked down at Tim's hands in the casket. His wedding ring was gone too. Tim never took off his ring. Never. He told me once, "Dad, this ring means I'm somebody's husband. I want everyone to know that." So, where was it? The service started at 2 o'clock. Pastor Paul Anderson from Community Faith Baptist presided. He'd known Tim since he was 12, baptized him when he decided to follow the Lord. Timothy Peterson was a light in this world, Pastor Anderson said. A successful businessman, yes, but more importantly, a good man, a faithful husband, a devoted son. I sat in the front pew, Linda on my left. On my right sat George Garcia, my oldest friend and former business partner. George was 68, a retired engineer who'd helped me build Peterson Construction from the ground up. He'd held my hand through Mary's funeral. Now he was here again. The service went on. Hymns, prayers, testimonies from people who loved my son. Then came time for the final viewing. People lined up to pay their respects one last time. I stood beside the casket, shaking hands, accepting hugs and condolences. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mr. Peterson. Tim was a wonderful man. You're in our prayers." I thanked them all. I smiled when I was supposed to smile. I nodded when I was supposed to nod. Then I saw him. Richard Thompson stood at the back of the line, 6 feet 2 inches, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal gray suit that probably cost $3,000. He was 44, Harvard MBA, and Tim's business partner for the past 8 years. Peterson Construction was their baby. They'd built it from my small operation into something worth $12 million. Richard's face was carefully neutral as he approached. Professional grief. The kind you wear when you need to look sad but don't actually feel anything. "Mr. Peterson," he said, taking my hand. His grip was firm, cold. "I'm so sorry. Tim was like a brother to me." "Thank you, Richard." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "If there's anything you need, anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. I'll make sure the business continues to honor Tim's legacy." Something in the way he said "the business" made my skin prickle. Richard nodded and moved toward the casket. He stood there for a moment, looking down at Tim. Then he did something strange. He smiled. Just for a second, a tiny curl at the corner of his mouth, so quick I almost missed it. Then he turned and walked away, heading toward the exit. I watched him go, my heart pounding. George touched my elbow. "You okay?" "Fine," I whispered. "Just tired?" But I wasn't fine. Something was very, very wrong. The receiving line continued. More hands to shake. More hollow words of comfort. Then Richard appeared beside me again. I hadn't seen him come back. He must have circled around through the side hallway. "Mr. Peterson," he said quietly. "Could I have a word? Just for a moment?" George gave me a questioning look. I nodded. "Of course." Richard gestured toward the small alcove near the funeral home's coat room, away from the crowd. We stepped into the alcove. Richard closed the distance between us, standing just a little too close. "I wanted to talk to you about the business," he said. "Now?" I kept my voice even. "Richard, this is my son's funeral." "I know. I'm sorry, but there are things that need to be handled quickly. Legal things. The company can't just stop." "I understand." "Do you?" He tilted his head slightly. "Tim owned 51% of Peterson Construction. That means his shares, his portion of the company, now belong to his estate, which means they belong to Linda, and potentially to you, depending on the will." I said nothing. Richard continued, $12 million is a lot of money, Mr. Peterson. It's complicated. There are investors, contracts, obligations. This isn't something someone without current business experience can handle." "Someone like me, you mean?" "I'm just being realistic." His voice was smooth, reasonable. "You built the company, yes, but you've been semi-retired for years. You don't know the current contracts, the legal compliance issues, the day-to-day operations." "I understand what you're saying, Richard." "Good." He smiled. That same small smile from before. "Then you'll understand why I think it's best if I buy out Tim's shares. I'll give you a fair price. You and Linda can walk away with plenty of money, and I'll handle the rest. Everyone wins." I looked up at him. Really looked at him. Richard Thompson. Handsome, educated, connected, standing in front of an old construction worker at his son's funeral, trying to convince him to sign away millions of dollars. "How much?" I asked, quietly. "I'm sorry?" "How much is a fair price for my son's life's work?" Richard's smile faltered. "Mr. Peterson, I'm not trying to—" "How much, Richard?" He straightened. $3 million cash. Clean deal, no lawyers, no delays. $3 million for shares worth over $6 million. Less than 50 cents on the dollar. Something cold settled in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Something sharper. Clarity. I'll think about it, I said. Richard's eyes narrowed. Don't think too long. The business world moves fast. He stopped mid-sentence. His hand moved to the alcove wall beside my head, caging me in. He leaned down, his mouth close to my ear. Don't worry, old man, he whispered. I'll make better use of that $12 million than Tim ever did. Your son was brilliant, I'll give him that. But he was too soft, too ethical. He didn't understand that in business, you have to be willing to do what it takes to win. His breath was warm against my skin. And between you and me, his voice dropped. Even lower. Tim was getting in the way, always questioning my decisions, always slowing things down with his moral concerns. The company will be better off without him. He pulled back, still smiling. Think about my offer, but don't take too long. You wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen. Heart problems run in families, don't they? Your wife had cancer, sure. But stress can be very dangerous for men your age, Mr. Peterson. All this grief, this confusion about business matters you don't understand. Well, it wouldn't be surprising if you had some health problems. He patted my shoulder. Take care of yourself. And think about my offer. Then he walked away, rejoining the crowd like nothing had happened. I stood in the alcove, my heart hammering. Richard Thompson had just threatened me at my son's funeral, and he'd implied, no, he'd practically said it, that Tim's death was somehow convenient for him. George appeared in the doorway. Hal, buddy, you look like you've seen a ghost. What did that man say to you? I opened my mouth to tell him, then stopped. If Richard was dangerous, if he'd done something to Tim, then I couldn't let him know I suspected anything. I had to be smart. Careful. Nothing, I said. Just business talk. You know how it is. George frowned, not buying it, but he didn't push. Come on, he said, taking my arm. Let's get you back to your seat. The burial was at Laurelhurst Cemetery, under a sprawling oak tree. The rain had stopped, but the ground was soft and muddy. We stood under a green tent while Pastor Anderson said the final prayers. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I watched them lower my son into the ground. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. People began to disperse. Linda stood apart from me, talking quietly with Richard. I watched them. The way they stood just a little too close. The way Richard's hand brushed Linda's elbow. George saw it, too. That don't look right, he muttered. No, I agreed. It doesn't? After everyone left, I asked the funeral director for a moment alone. He nodded and stepped away. I approached the casket one last time. They'd closed it for the burial, but I touched the smooth wood anyway. I love you, son, I whispered. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. Then I saw it. Tucked beneath one of the flower arrangements on top of the casket was a small white envelope. My name was written on it in handwriting I knew as well as my own. Tim's handwriting. My hands shook as I picked it up. I looked around. No one was watching. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper folded once. I unfolded it. Dad, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I don't have time to explain everything, but you need to know I'm in danger. Richard has been stealing from the company. $3.8 million over the past 18 months. I found proof. I was going to turn him in. I think Linda knows. I think she's helping him. I've left information in our safety. Deposit box at Columbia Bank. Box 847. You have the key. Remember the key I gave you last Christmas? I told you it was for my storage unit. I lied. It's for the safety deposit box. Everything you need is in there. I also hired a private investigator. His name is Steve Wilson. His number is in the box, too. Dad, I'm scared. I don't know what they'll do. But if something happens to me, you need to know it wasn't an accident. Please be careful. Richard is dangerous. So is Linda. I love you. You're the strongest person I've ever known. You survived Vietnam, built a business from nothing, raised me after Mom died. You can survive this too. Get justice for me, Dad. Love always, Tim. I read the note 3 times, my vision blurring. My son had known. He'd known he was in danger, and he'd left me a roadmap to the truth. Richard didn't just threaten me today. He'd already killed my son, and now he was coming for me. I folded the note carefully and put it in my pocket. Then I looked up, at the oak tree, its branches reaching toward the gray Portland sky. I hear you, son, I whispered, and I promise you, I'm going to make this right. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table in my house on Northeast Alberta Street, the same house Mary and I bought in 1987 for $73,000. The same house where we raised Tim, where we had Christmas mornings and birthday parties and Sunday dinners after church. Now it was just me. Tim's note lay on the table in front of me. I'd read it so many times the paper was soft from my fingerprints. Richard has been stealing from the company. $3.8 million. I think Linda knows. I think she's helping him. If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I made myself a cup of coffee and opened my laptop. I typed cerebral hemorrhage causes into Google. The first page talked about aneurysms, high blood pressure, head trauma, natural causes. Then I scrolled down. Drug-induced cerebral hemorrhage. I clicked the link. Certain medications, when used in excessive doses, can cause bleeding in the brain. Warfarin, blood thinners, are particularly dangerous when misused. Warfarin. I'd heard that name before. My buddy from Vietnam, Danny Martinez, had been on it for years after his heart surgery. One little pill keeps the blood flowing, he always said, but too much and you bleed to death internally. I kept reading. Symptoms of warfarin overdose include unusual bruising, nosebleeds, bleeding gums, fatigue, headaches. 2 weeks before he died, Tim had called me. He'd sounded tired. I've been getting these headaches, Dad. Bad ones. And I keep getting nosebleeds. Have you seen a doctor? I'd asked. Linda says it's just stress. She's been making me these health smoothies, vitamins and stuff. She says they'll help. Oh, God. Linda had been making him smoothies. At 9 o'clock the next morning, March 19th, 2024, I walked into Columbia Bank on Northeast Broadway. I wore my church clothes, a navy suit, low heels, my good coat. I wanted to look respectable, not like a grieving father who'd lost his mind. The bank manager, a young woman named Stephanie, greeted me with professional sympathy. Mr. Peterson, I was so sorry to hear about Tim. He was such a wonderful client. Thank you, I said. I need to access our safety deposit box, number 847. Of course. Do you have the key? I pulled out the small silver key Tim had given me last Christmas. He'd tucked it in an envelope with a card that said, "For emergencies, Dad, just in case." I'd thought it was strange at the time, but Tim had always been careful, prepared. Now I understood why. Stephanie led me down to the vault. She used her master key and my key to open box 847, then pulled out a long metal container. Take your time, she said, leaving me alone in the small privacy room. I opened the box. Inside was a thick manila envelope, a USB drive, and a smaller white envelope labeled Steve Wilson, Private Investigator. The manila envelope contained spreadsheets, columns of numbers, dates, and account names. At the top, in Tim's handwriting, Richard Thompson Unauthorized Transfers. January 15th, 2023. $47,000 transferred from Peterson Construction Operating Account to RTM Holdings, LLC. February 3rd, 2023. $63,500 transferred to RTM Holdings, LLC. March 22nd, 2023. $89,000 transferred to RTM Holdings, LLC. On and on. Dozens of transfers, different amounts, different dates, but always to the same place. RTM Holdings, LLC. At the bottom of the page, Tim had written, Total $3,842,000. The next document was a corporate filing from the Oregon Secretary of State. RTM Holdings, LLC, registered December 8, 2022. Owner, Richard Thompson. Richard had created a fake company and been funneling Peterson construction money into his own pocket for over a year. But there was more. Bank statements for an account at Wells Fargo. Account holder, Linda Peterson. Deposit January 18, 2023, $15,000. Source, RTM Holdings, LLC. Deposit March 1, 2023, $20,000. Source, RTM Holdings, LLC. Deposit April 12, 2023, $18,500. Source, RTM Holdings, LLC. Richard had been paying Linda. The deposits continued month after month, totaling $463,000. This wasn't just embezzlement. This was conspiracy. Richard and Linda had been working together for over a year, stealing from Tim, planning. And then they'd killed him. The white envelope contained a business card and a handwritten note from Tim. Dad, Steve Wilson is ex-Portland PD. He's been investigating Richard for 6 months. His retainer is paid through April. Trust him. I called the number on the card as soon as I got home. Wilson Investigations, a man's voice answered. Mr. Wilson, my name is Harold Peterson. I'm Tim Peterson's father. A pause. Then, Mr. Peterson, I've been waiting for your call. I'm very sorry about your son. Thank you. Tim left me your information. He said you've been investigating Richard Thompson. I have. Are you somewhere? Private? Somewhere you can talk? I looked around my empty living room. Yes. Good. Don't discuss this over the phone. Can you meet me today? There's a coffee shop on Killingsworth and Interstate. Cup and saucer. 2 o'clock. I'll be there. Steve Wilson was not what I expected. He was a black man in his mid-40s, stocky and solid with close-cropped hair going gray at the temples. He wore jeans and a Portland Trailblazers jacket. He looked like somebody's uncle, not a private investigator, but his eyes were sharp, alert. He stood when I approached the table. Mr. Peterson. He shook my hand. His grip was firm. Thank you for coming. We sat. He'd already ordered me a coffee. Black, the way I like it. How did you know? I asked. Tim told me. Said his dad drank his coffee black and took his problems head on. Said you were the toughest man he'd ever known. My throat tightened. He was a good boy. He was a good man, Steve corrected gently. And he loved you very much. That's why he hired me. He wanted to make sure you'd have everything you needed if something happened to him. You think they killed him? It wasn't a question. Steve opened a folder on the table. I know they did. I just couldn't prove it yet. Not in a way that would hold up in court. He slid a photograph across the table. It showed Linda and Richard at a restaurant. They were sitting close together, Richard's hand on Linda's knee. Linda was laughing. That was taken on February 4th, 2024, Steve said. At Cafe Nell in Northwest Portland, 6 weeks before Tim died. Another photo. Linda and Richard entering a hotel. February 17th. They stayed for 3 hours. Another photo. Richard and Linda in Richard's car, kissing. March 2nd, 2 weeks before Tim's death. Steve pulled out more photos, dozens of them. Linda and Richard at restaurants, hotels, Richard's condo in the Pearl District. A timeline of an affair spanning 6 months. Tim suspected the affair starting last November, Steve said. He hired me to confirm it. I did, but then I found something else. He pulled out more documents. The same bank records I'd seen, plus more. Richard didn't just steal from Peterson Construction, Steve continued. He was setting up to dissolve the company, liquidate the assets, and disappear. Tim found out in early March. That's when things got dangerous. How dangerous? Steve met my eyes. Tim called me on March 13th, 2 days before he died. He said he'd confronted Richard, told him he knew about the embezzlement and was going to the police. Richard laughed, said Tim couldn't prove anything, said if Tim tried to destroy Richard's reputation, Richard would destroy him. What did Tim say? He said he had proof. He was going to the district attorney's office on March 18th. Steve's voice dropped. He never made it. They killed him, I whispered. I believe so. Here's the problem. The medical examiner ruled it natural death. No autopsy was ordered because there was no reason to suspect anything. What about warfarin? In high doses, it can cause brain bleeding. Steve's eyebrows went up. You've been doing your homework. I was thinking about Tim's symptoms. Headaches, nosebleeds. Linda was making him health smoothies. Steve leaned forward. Did you tell anyone this? No. Good. Don't. He pulled out his phone and made a note. I have a contact at the medical examiner's office, Dr. Patricia Martinez. She's thorough. If I can convince her to look at Tim's case again, she might order a toxicology screen. 3 days later, Steve called me. We got lucky. Dr. Martinez agreed to exhume Tim's body for a full autopsy and toxicology screen. She found warfarin levels 17 times the therapeutic dose. She's changing the cause of death to homicide. The arrests came fast after that. Linda was taken into custody on March 28th at her West Hills home. She broke down immediately when Detective Karen Martinez showed her the evidence. The affair photos, the bank records, the toxicology report. I didn't want to kill him, she sobbed. I didn't want any of this. I just wanted out. I was drowning in gambling debts. $800,000. Richard said he'd help me if I helped him. Help him do what? Detective Martinez asked. Take money from the company. Keep Tim distracted so he wouldn't look too closely at the books. But then Tim found out. Richard said if Tim went to the police, we'd both go to prison. He said there was only one way out. What way? Make it look like Tim had a stroke. Richard got the warfarin from a pharmaceutical contact. He said if I gave it to Tim gradually in his morning smoothies, it would thin his blood. Then one large dose would cause a brain hemorrhage. The doctors would think it was natural. Who administered the final dose? Linda's voice dropped to a whisper. I did. March 15th. Richard said to give him triple the normal amount. He said it would happen fast, that Tim wouldn't suffer. But he did suffer, didn't he? The headaches, the nosebleeds. He was in pain for weeks. Richard was arrested on March 30th at Portland International Airport. He'd been trying to board a flight to Costa Rica with $487,000 in cash and a fake passport. The trials were swift. Richard's defense tried to claim Linda had acted alone, that she'd manipulated him. The jury didn't believe him. The prosecution presented the bank records, surveillance footage, Richard's pharmaceutical contact who testified about the warfarin purchase, and Linda's full confession. On June 28, 2024, Richard Thompson was convicted on all counts. Sentencing: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Linda pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and voluntary manslaughter in exchange for a reduced sentence. She got 18 years in the Oregon State Correctional Institution. At her sentencing hearing, she addressed the court. Your Honor, I know there's nothing I can say that will make this right. I killed a good man. I killed Tim because I was weak and scared and selfish. She turned to face me in the gallery. Mr. Peterson, I know you'll never forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. Tim was kind to me. He loved me, and I killed him. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at this woman who'd slept in my son's bed, eaten at my table, called me dad on holidays. This woman who'd murdered my child. I don't forgive you, I said clearly. But I hope prison gives you time to find whatever piece of your soul you lost. I sold Peterson Construction 6 months later, and used the money to establish the Tim Peterson Justice Fund. We help families investigate suspicious deaths when the police won't listen. So far, we've helped 11 families find the truth about their loved ones. Richard thought he was dealing with just another old man who wouldn't fight back. He was wrong. In Vietnam, they taught us that the enemy's biggest mistake is underestimating you. My son's death wasn't in vain. His legacy lives on in every family we help, every criminal we expose, every truth we uncover. That's the thing about justice. Sometimes it takes time, but it always finds a way. Never mistake an old man's silence for weakness. We've survived too much to be intimidated by those who think money makes them untouchable. The greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's proving that honor and persistence will always outlast greed and arrogance.